Hi everyone and welcome to Mad Knitting. This is episode 66. It is Friday, July 26th in the year 2024. My name is Susan. My pronouns are she, her, hers, and you can find me elsewhere online as madtownmama on Ravelry and madtown_mama on Instagram. I'm gonna grab my beverage because I move my hands a lot and this helps me keep them still. Anyway, it's been about 2 weeks since my last episode, but it feels like that 2 weeks is more like 10 years. I just can't believe how much has happened in the last 2 weeks. Our lives are chugging along as normal, but like the state of the election and politics is just a wild thing. In my last episode, I opened with just a few minutes commenting on Supreme Court rulings and what was going on with Joe Biden, and I'm not going to spend a lot of time on that here, but I do feel like I should follow up and say everything I said about the Supreme Court is unchanged. Very disappointing. But as far as Biden goes, like, I am pleased to say that I was very wrong about him. I was very worried this past Sunday, of course, when he announced he was withdrawing from the election. I was worried for a little bit, but then the support around Kamala Harris just coalesced immediately, and I think she's a great candidate. I feel very good about voting for her, assuming she is the nominee, and it's just really remarkable to see how all of that has come together so quickly. I was worried about the chaos and the sort of public chaos of the Democratic Party, but I think maybe given the timing, how close we are to the election, and how dire things look with the opponents, and what would happen if they take office and take control, I think probably the people behind the scenes realized how important it was to get behind a candidate and do that quickly and make sure it was somebody that had a lot of experience. And anyway, yeah, glad I was wrong about that is what I'm gonna say. And it's okay to be wrong and admit it. I think a lot of us did not realize what was gonna happen. Anyway, and I have to say I have a lot of respect for at least the way Biden publicly presented this decision. I'm sure it was not easy for him. I'm sure he didn't really want to do it, but in the end, he put country over personal gain, and I think that was a very honorable thing to do. What I don't like is how probably what the final nail in the coffin was wealthy donors pulling their support, and I don't like how people with a lot of money have so much power in decision making. That's not good, but ultimately in the long run, the decision that was made, I think, is probably for the best. So I'm feeling a sense of hope that I have not felt in a while, so yay. Okay, I kept it to about 3 minutes, didn't I? So I'm gonna move on. This channel is all about crafting stuff. Obviously, I don't shy away from social and political topics when they are just too big to ignore, but I really do try to keep it to the crafting because I like to get on the internet and talk about knitting. So here we go. Okay, what do I have for you today is one finished object, 3 works in progress, 1 abandoned project. I have some quilting to show you, which is very exciting. And if I have time, I may share just one thing that I'm reading because it's just super cool. So here we go. My finished object, it's the one and only I've got, and I realized that I left it in the other room, so let me go get it. My one finished object is this shawl. It's called the Eyelet Triangle by Layla Raven or Layla Robb. And I am just pleased as punch with this. And I blocked it last night in some kind of scented wool wash. I can't remember what it is, but this smells really good now. So let me show you close up. It's a really simple stitch pattern. This is, when it comes to lace, this kind of thing is my jam, because once I figured out the pattern repeat and how it all worked, I did not even have to check the pattern. And I think I overshot the final stitch count by some. I would have made it bigger because I wanted to use up all the yarn, but I reached a point a couple of nights ago where I was just getting a little tired of knitting it, and I actually didn't want it any bigger because you can't see all in one frame. But blocked out, it's a little bit longer than my own wingspan. So let me talk about this pattern. Like I said, it was very easy to follow. It uses 2 different yarns, which I'll show you in a bit. But this is like the perfect shape for me. It's long, it's not super deep, so I can wear it kind of like a scarf. You know, shawls that are really, really deep, like triangle shawls, or even like half circles. Have I knit a half circle shawl? I don't think so. There's so much extra fabric in the middle that I'm not sure how to wear them. But this is perfect, and it's also light as air. I can't believe how light this is. So it's pretty warm here, and I don't have the AC on, I just have the windows open, so we'll see how long I can tolerate this on my neck. But let me show you the yarn, because the yarn, it was pure pleasure to knit with. This is the contrast, actually. This is a Merino Mohair blend, sport weight, from a local farm called Crazy Valley Farmers. I don't even know that they have a website, but they are on Instagram. They were vending at a local show, and this yarn was so lovely and intriguing that I just wanted to try it. So it's almost half and half, merino and mohair. And you can see, if you look real close, you can see there's a little bit of that halo from the mohair. I don't know how well it's showing up. By the way, I'm just used my phone for recording, and I put it on the regular video setting instead of cinematic, because I think the cinematic setting is the reason that I was having all that focusing issue before. So we're gonna see how this goes. Anyway, it's really soft from the merino. It's very drapey from the mohair, and also very warm. So I think I'm gonna take this off. And I don't find it itchy in the least. I think they must just use the softest part of the mohair fiber in this, because it doesn't bother me personally. Sometimes mohair can be a little itchy, but this is not, in my experience. I don't know how many grams the one skein was, but it was 250 yards, and I bought 2 skeins. So I've got a lot left, because this is what's left in the first skein. Yeah, I don't know what to do with the rest of it. This bright yarn, this electric neon fun fuzzy yarn, is called Alpaca Silk Cashmere Floof, I think. It's from Republica Unicornia, and this is the color Electric Disco Clam. Not part of my usual wheelhouse. I don't even know this is a color that I wear particularly well, but I love how it goes with this neutral. This is like a very warm gray, or a cool, yeah, it's like a beigey gray, I don't know. Kind of a hard one to pinpoint, but I really like how they go together. And it's alpaca silk cashmere, so it's like knitting with buttery clouds. I don't know how to describe it any better than that. And also, I want to say, like, it's really fuzzy, as you can see, but this did not shed particularly. I was worried that it would leave bits of fiber all over me knitting, and it really didn't. So that gives me hope that I can wear it without, you know, looking like I've been rolling in cat hair or something. So anyway, the 2 colors worked together beautifully. The textures worked together beautifully. And I have this lovely shawl that I can wear when the weather cools down. And I haven't weighed it, but I didn't use a full skein of either one, and it's just the right size. So yeah, that's my one finished object. All right, let's move on to works in progress. I have socks to show you, so I'm going to start with those. In my last episode, I showed you this sock I had started and announced my intention to possibly frog it, and then I was done recording the episode, and then I changed my mind and decided to keep going and see how I liked it. The main reason being that the day I recorded that episode, shortly after I left to go to an outdoor theater performance, and I really wanted something to keep my hands busy, and this was all I had. Like, I didn't want to start another sock, and I didn't have anything else that was portable. This shawl that I just showed you was almost a portable project, but the yarn and needles were so slippery, and there's so many yarn overs that it was a good pick up and put down project for home, but not good to take around to other places. So anyway, so I needed a sock project, and I just ended up taking this one with me, and I thought if I don't like it, I can just rip it out and it's not the end of the world. And the further I got on it, the more I realized that it was fine. I think my concerns about the loose fabric have been allayed as I've gone on. So this isn't, anything earth-shattering or terribly original, but I did add in just a little bit of a color work. Let me do it right side up. Little bit of a color work pattern at the cuff, and I will mirror this at the toe. I will do this same little sort of picket fence or staggered picket fence sort of motif. I don't know if that's what you'd call it. Right before the toe, and I will do the toe in this natural color. But everything else about this is just a plain old sock. I'm using Sun Valley Fibers fingering tweed in this color and then a natural color. This might be called Kindness or something having to do with kindness. It's a really lovely dusty teal. Left over from another project, and I have a lot of it, like plenty for a pair of socks and probably mitts or something else. These are not for me. I have someone in mind to give these to, and I cast on 68 stitches for a slightly bigger foot. But I'm using size 1 needles to get a firm fabric. I think for this tweed yarn, which is a little bit thin and on the ropey side, I could probably even go down to a size 0 and get an even firmer fabric, but this is fine. Once I got past the heel, I tried it on my foot and decided it felt just fine. So I am very close to doing the toe. I'll have to try it on again and see. But that's one project. I actually haven't picked this up in a little bit because I wanted to get the shawl finished, but sock projects are really good for taking along to events or meetings, or picking up when I have Zoom calls, which I seem to have a lot of these days. So yeah, so that's one sock in progress. And what do I have here? Is this the label? Yeah, I got a label to show you. Kindred Spirits, not Kindness. Kindred Spirits is the name of that color. That dusty teal color. And I can't remember what the natural color is called. Might just be natural or cream or something like that. Okay, I started another pair of socks. And the more I do socks, because I tend to take them with me places, it's kind of fun to think about, when I look back at a project, it's kind of fun to reflect on when I was knitting them. Like, what occasion did I have to start another pair of socks? And we're in election season. I have been to a couple of different events for local candidates, including one last week. There was somebody who's running for a state assembly. She's actually not in my district. She's in a different district, but I know her a little bit, and a friend of mine was going to go to this fundraising event, so I joined her, And I knew that there was going to be a lot of yapping before before we got to eat dinner, which was part of the event. So I grabbed some sock yarn to start knitting. And this is Knitpicks Felici. It's in the color Fiesta. So it's got really fun, bright stripes. Kind of a mix of like bright sort of jewel tones and then like mixed in with a little bit of earthy, like this mustard and this avocado green are kind of earthy colors, which in the skein looking at it, I wasn't sure if I liked it, but in the sock, it's very fun. I have someone in mind to give this to. I think her feet are a little bit smaller than mine, so I am casting on the same number of stitches as for my foot, but I'll make the foot just a little shorter to fit her shoe size. Hoping that works. Yeah, so I've cast on 64 stitches. I'm using size 1 needles. I like doing a 2x2 rib cuff. And I'm part way through the heel. This is a garter stitch short row heel. These days, I really enjoy when I'm doing a short row heel, which I almost always do for self-striping yarn, because I like to preserve the width of the stripes as I'm going around the heel. I have just really been enjoying that garter stitch heel over a stockinette stitch. I think that, here's why I like it. First, there's no purling. Not that I'm allergic to purling, but it's slightly more pleasant to be working in garter stitch when you're going back and forth. Second, I like the texture. I just like the look of it. I mean, it's very, I don't know, it's very satisfying to have that contrast and texture between, you know, those garter ridges and then the smooth stockinette of the leg and then the foot later. And third of all, I think that in garter stitch, the wrapped stitches, or I do I don't know what it's called. It's a double stitch where you just sort of yank the stitch over the needle and then knit through both legs is when you come back around. I think it looks just a little tighter and neater in garter stitch than in stockinette. And I guess it's because you've already got bumps and ridges from the garter stitch itself. So when you have those double stitches that you've resolved, you know, going back and forth, it just kind of blends in a little better. So anyway, this is still the first sock. I tend to zoom through these once I get started, especially when I have things to sit through, so it probably won't take me too long to finish these. These sock projects are the only ones I have going right now that are for other people, which is kind of refreshing. Not working on a self-imposed deadline on these. Socks go fast. I don't have to worry a whole lot about fit. I feel like it's easier to get things to fit feet than, you know, like torsos. So it's been kind of nice. I do have a 3-day work trip coming up next week, and I'll be like busy in meetings, like we're engaged. It's not just sitting around, but there's going to be a lot of time where I'm listening to other people talk also. So I need to make sure I have all of my knitting lined up before I leave, because there's going to be a lot of time, and I get really fidgety when I have to sit still and listen to things. Like my hands have to be moving and engaged, or I just lose my focus. So yeah, I'm just thinking out loud here because I realize I need to make sure I have projects. Like I might want to get to a point in my next project, which is a sweater, where I can just, you know, do all the stockinette without having to think too much. So let's look at it. Let's look at that next project. Did I show my colors last time? I don't think I did. Well, anyway, let me talk about it again. So, grabbing my yarn here. I am making Little Boosta Yoke by Gudrun Johnston. And couple episodes ago, I was sharing all about my plans for the Colors of Fall Knit Along, which is hosted by the Yarny X podcast. It's fabulous. We are not yet halfway through because it starts on the June solstice and goes through the September equinox. So there's almost 2 months left. Anyway, I shared my intentions for this sweater and showed off my colors, and there was a commenter who said, you know, this kind of looks like American superhero colors. Have you thought about that? And I had not thought about that. But once I started, and especially after I added the red, I decided I am leaning into it. I love it. And considering the events of the last 6 days, I'm just going to call this my Get Out the Vote sweater, because this has some pretty strong, voter vibes to me. So here's a closer look at the yoke, which was so fun to knit. I had a hard time putting this down. So I'm using, let me back up and talk about the pattern. So this is a pattern by Gudrun Johnston. I've already knit another color work yoke sweater of hers called the Porty Pullover. That was steeked down the front. It's a cardigan. I love it. I wore the heck out of it until it was too warm to wear it anymore. And I have a feeling she uses pretty much the same block for a whole series of patterns, just with different color work designs in the top, because they all have the same gauge. They have the same kind of size range. This is the smallest one. It should be, my gauge is slightly off. Mine will be about an inch smaller around. So I think the finished size for me will be a little over 33 inches, but in the pattern, the smallest is a 34.5. And she has a pretty inclusive size range. I think it goes over a 60-inch chest, but I'd have to check and be sure. Maybe I can put that at the bottom of the screen for you, in case you're curious. Anyway, her patterns are very well written and very clear, and from my standpoint, and I really enjoyed knitting this yoke. It was so fun, especially adding the red. So that's the pattern. Love it. I am just down to the main color now for the rest of it, or at least for the main part. So I am using Berroco Lanas Light. This is 100% wool yarn. Listed as sport weight, but for me, I like how it knits up at 7 stitches to the inch, which is much closer to fingering weight. When I use bigger needles, it feels too loose and flimsy to me. This is the same yarn I used for the previous sweater, just obviously in different colors. So I felt very confident that the gauge would work out, which is important because I have a failed project to show you in a bit. Anyway, this main color I'm using is called Lagoon. It's kind of a bright aqua teal color. I mean, I think I can wear it. I like it. This isn't a color I ordinarily gravitate to, but I guess I'm branching out just a little bit. For the contrast colors, I have this darker teal, which I like that it's in the same kind of family or whatever. And then for the major contrast, I have this bright red. I mean, this is about as red as you get. It's like fire engine red, and then white. So very bold, bright colors. I'm very much enjoying knitting this. Like I said, I have this 3-day meeting coming up next week. So maybe my goal before I leave is to get, and this shouldn't be hard because I have short rows to finish, to raise the back neck a little bit, and then the sleeve divide, and then I'll be just on the body. I usually do just a little bit of shaping so it doesn't pooch out below the bust, but other than that, it's just going to be knitting round and round and round and round on these size 3 needles for the body. So I'm very excited about that. So I definitely want to get this done by the end of the knit along. I've got almost 2 months. I don't think I will have a problem with that. In part just because it's fun to finish something and participate that way, but also because obviously we are in an election season and it is one of the most unusual and exciting and stressful elections that I've ever experienced, at least as an adult. And you know what? I lived through the Bush years. Like I was eligible to vote by the time that all happened. So that's saying a lot is what I'm saying. Anyway, I would like to have this ready so that I can wear it when I vote, and I might even be willing to go knock on some doors and encourage more people to vote. We will see. That's not usually my jam, but it's important to vote. That's my public service announcement. Okay, so let's keep moving. The last knitting project I have to show you is my fail. This is my second failed sweater in a row, and I'm okay, but it was frustrating. So, and I talked about the issues with this last time. This is that Neela sweater by Natasha Hornby, and I haven't even been able to bring myself to rip it out yet. So this is as far as I got. It's a top-down sweater. So you start with the back, you cast on like for the neck and do some very dramatic increases for the shoulders, which do kind of have this slope as you go. You go to a certain length, put all the stitches on hold, then one at a time you pick up the shoulder stitches and work down the fronts of the right and left fronts separately. You know, you do some shaping for the neck, eventually join those to finish the front down to the armholes. And then the idea is that you join it all up in the round and work your way down for the rest of the body. Okay, so I noticed pretty early on that I was having a pretty big discrepancy in row gauge between the front and the back. But I kept going. What you do, so you've got this textured pattern in the back, basically done with purl stitches every few rows. And it's pretty simple. This is like a 1x1 twist, you know, going down the middle. So the fabric created here is much denser than what you have on the front, which is a couple of lace panels that are a little bit of a pain in the ass to work back and forth. I'm not gonna lie, because you're doing yarn overs every row, even when you're purling back. So there's yarn overs and purl through the back loop, and you know, it's not impossible, but it is just kind of a pain. But I noticed that with the lace, it's just much more open and drapey. And when I knit to the same number of rows, you're supposed to keep track of how many rows you knit down the back, starting from the top of the neck, not from here because that's sloped. You're supposed to count those, keep track, and have the same number going down the front. Well, I did that. And even accounting for this slant, which is not at the shoulder line, I have at least an inch and a half difference in height or in length for the front than the back. So what was I to do? I actually asked on the designer's forum online. The suggestion was to block it and see what happens, which made sense. I also considered that I could just knit more rows down the back to make sure that they match. But my concern about that was once you join for the round, if your row gauge is way different in the front than the back, it's gonna ride way up or sag in weird places, and I just didn't think that was gonna work for the main part of the body. Somebody suggested that if I wanted, I could just knit these as separate pieces and sew it up so that I would have more rows in the back in order to make sure that the length matched. But that just felt like a lot that I didn't really want to do. I did block it absolutely nothing changed. So it's good to know that the yarn holds its shape, at least with this gauge. But what I've decided is that I just need to frog this. I love the design. I still want to make it. I just think I need to choose different yarn. And I really like this yarn. It's called Zooey. It's by Juniper Moon Farm, and it's a cotton linen blend that's a little bit thick and thin. It's a little bit textured, but seemed to work okay with this pattern. But this row gauge issue is just too much. So I haven't ripped it out, partly because I wanted to show this and talk about it here. Also because I'm frustrated. But I also was just going over and over in my head and trying to figure out why I was having this issue. I mean, it's not that surprising to me that I would have a difference in gauge between a lace section and a textured section. You know, a knit purl textured section. But when I asked, you know, when I went to the forum online and just asked if anybody else was having this issue, and when I looked at other projects, it didn't seem to be a problem. And I know I followed directions and everything, and you know, the stitch gauge seemed to match up just fine. But I think the problem is that the yarn I'm using is not really a sport weight gauge, even though you're knitting it at a sport weight gauge. I mentioned this before, but on the label, it says that you should be getting 20 to 24 stitches over 4 inches, which is a pretty wide range. That's like from worsted to sport weight. And I used a size 3 needle to get that 6 stitches to the inch that I needed for the pattern. And I think that by doing that, I have a fabric that is so dense that for this textured part in the back, it doesn't have any give. And I think if I used a lighter yarn that had a little more drape, that was able to relax at a looser gauge, they might match up a little better and it wouldn't be such a discrepancy. So if I make this design, I need to find a different yarn for it, which I can live with. I don't think I have anything in stash is the problem, and I really shouldn't be buying more. And I would like to make a sweater out of this yarn because I like the feel of it, and even though it's a little bit hard on my hands, I do enjoy it. So I think I'll find a plain pattern that doesn't have, that I don't have to worry about gauge and difference in pattern. Yeah, I'll just find like a plain tee, maybe a looser gauge where the fabric can be more relaxed. Because I'll be honest, the other thing is that in a cotton linen yarn with no give, knitting a lot of like yarn overs and decreases and stuff is not very comfortable. It's much more comfortable when you can do that with a wool yarn or something that has a little more elasticity. So lesson learned about yarn choice on this one. But I'm moving on. I have this other sweater to work on. I will be fine. That's all my knitting. But I have been working on a quilt. I want to show you how that's going. And I think what I'm going to do is move the camera back so I've got a little more room to actually show you the whole thing. See if that works. Okay. Oh boy, you can see more of my house now. Do I like that? I don't know. So I showed you these quilt blocks before. Maybe I'll show you a couple close up. I found a bag of all these 9 patches that I made years ago. There was a solid fabric with a receipt from more than 10 years ago in that bag. And then I made a bunch more blocks, these sort of improvised tree blocks to go with them. And then, I know I talked about this in a previous episode, I can't remember which one, and then I decided I wanted to put them together. So I went to my favoritist ever local quilt shop, Blue Bar, and they helped me pick out some fabric to go with them and pull it all together. So I had some solid blue, this isn't it. Yeah, this is it. Solid blue that went with the plaids, and I used that for some of this sashing in between, and they helped me find what's a pretty good match This blue has got teeny little specks. I don't even know if they're showing up. And this green that also goes with it. And I put it all together, y'all. And I'm real proud of it. This is just the top. I don't have the whole quilt put together. And I don't know if the whole thing is going to show on camera, but I will do my best. The numbers didn't totally work out for the top row, so I just put what I had. But I have a row of 9 patch, and then a row of trees, and then a row of 9 patch, and then a row of trees. And this is big enough to fit a twin size bed. When you buy batting in the package that's already sized for a bed, twin size batting is about 70 by 90 inches, and I think that is approximately the measurement I have here. So what I have left to do is find some fabric for the backing, or look through what I've got and piece it together. I think I might rather just buy backing because you can get it in these really wide cuts, and then it's much easier to deal with. And sandwich that in with the batting, and then I need to figure out how to quilt it. I might send it out to have somebody else quilt. I might try and do it myself, although I don't have a good machine for trying to wrestle a whole large quilt in it, even for very simple stitching. And I gotta tell y'all, move this camera back now. I don't really have much interest in learning how to do machine quilting. I know that it's a whole set of skills. There's some people that really love it. There are people that do it professionally. I could send it out and just have somebody else do it, but I haven't decided if this quilt is worth it. I could tie it. I've done that before, where you just take crochet cotton and you tie it through the layers. That doesn't, sometimes you have to supplement that with other quilting. I could hand quilt, which would take a while, but could be very relaxing, meditative. Not portable, unfortunately, but you know, I could hand quilt just sort of along the straight lines here in the sashing. I haven't totally decided. It feels good to have gotten this far. I'm very good at starting quilts and then not finishing them. I'm good at buying fabric and then not sewing it up. So I want to do better with that. I am not 100% in love with this project. I think it felt good to use up these old blocks, and it felt good to use up scraps and be creative. But the bright blue and the bright green's a little much. That is maybe not what I would have chosen if I was putting together a whole quilt project now. So I'm not sure where this will end up. I don't know if it'll end up on a bed in our house, or if I will give it away, or what I will do with it. That is not what I'm worried about right now. But I would like to get it done, and then it'll feel good to have a quilt done. I have made several quilts in the past, but never kept any of them. I have made several for gifts. I've made at least 3 or 4 baby gift quilts. I made a retirement gift 10 years ago or so when my daughter finished first grade and her teacher retired. I made a quilt for him. But this might be the first one that I am making and keeping. So that's kind of exciting. All right. I've actually worked through everything a little quicker than I thought. So I'm going to share you one thing that I've been reading. And it's, this is highly anticipated for me. Okay. So there is this artist named Linda Berry. She wrote this book called Making Comics. She teaches here in Madison. She teaches at the university. When I looked her up, I learned that she was a MacArthur Fellow in 2019, which is huge. Those fellowships are incredible. They are so prestigious, and they go to like the most creative, most brilliant minds, you know? But I had never heard of her till like a month or two ago. This friend of mine told me that she had gotten this book and that it was totally life-changing. This friend of mine is, she's an academic. She's in the sciences, and she's, I think, a little burnt out and disillusioned. So, I mean, this is technically a self-help book in some ways. It like walks you through how to make comics, but it's just, and I have only begun, like this index card is my bookmark. But it is so cool. This is not about how to be a really good artist or how to draw. It's really about the practice, I think, of putting pen to paper every day and seeing what comes out and seeing how that transforms your thoughts and how you see the world. It's really hard to explain, I think, but it's incredible. I think she used to have a relationship with Matt Groening, who's the creator of The Simpsons. And another thing that comes through is that she really loves working with children and watching like really young children draw, because she says in this book, and she has another one called Syllabus that I also read that I think I might need to own as well, because there's a lot of, it's how like she approaches the classes she teaches, and all the drawing exercises and stuff are in that book, so you can do them too. But she talks about how kids often stop drawing when they're about 8 or 9 or 10, when they're at the age when they realize they quote unquote aren't good at drawing hands or noses or dogs or whatever it is, and then they get self-conscious and they stop. So she's all about like rediscovering. She likes to work with young kids because they don't have that self-consciousness. They just start drawing, and like, you know, what might have started out as a ladder turns into a rocket ship, and it's just all, you know, the imagination just is unencumbered, you know? And so she's trying to tap into that for older people, you know, college students and adults and whoever it is she's working with. So, I am not a great artist, but I do kind of doodle. See above regarding how I have to fidget all the time. If I'm not knitting, I'm doodling or making lists, or, you know, like my fingers just have to be moving all the time. So I am looking forward to seeing what comes out and seeing what I learn. And in particular, I love that it's all based in your imagination and not your skill necessarily. But there's a lot in here about how she, you know, this is like lessons and syllabi and assignments that she's had for her classes and the rules she has for her classes. And she has some pretty strict rules around like attendance and showing up and doing this every day. I mean, it takes discipline, which I'm all about that. I'm a, you know, professional musician formerly, and well, currently, but that's, you know, discipline and practice every day. That was my life. So yeah, so I'm excited about this. And I recommend, you know, even if you don't ever draw anything, I do recommend, you know, if you've got this in your library, checking this out, or her other book, Syllabus, because it'll get you thinking about different things, and it's really pretty cool. So that's all I have to share with you today. I am so glad you joined me, and I will see you next time. Bye-bye.